A CBS News poll out this morning shows most Americans are worried that North Korea's nuclear weapons program could lead to war. 72% say they are uneasy about a possible conflict.
Only 35% are confident in President Trump's ability to handle the situation. The poll was taken over 4 days as the UN approved tough new economic sanctions against North Korea.
The U.S. will rely heavily on China to enforce the measures. China accounts for more than 90% of North Korean trade. Trade between China and North Korea is up more than 10% this year. Ben Tracy is in Beijing with the American goal for these new sanctions. Ben, good morning.
Good morning. It took more than a month for the U.S. to get China and Russia to go along with these sanctions that they say will cost North Korea more than $1 billion each year. But the questions now are, will China and Russia actually enforce these sanctions, and will they work?
North Korea's most famous news anchor defiantly announced that the North won't put its weapons on the negotiating table, despite what it calls fabricated UN sanctions. Building a nuclear weapon and missile program is not cheap. The UN sanctions banning major North Korean exports such as coal and iron are designed to starve the regime of the money to pay for it. Money that is also used to enrich the powerful elites and generals who in turn don't challenge Kim Jong-un's near total power. Anthony Ruggiero is an expert on sanctions.
The North Korean regime is going to have to make a choice. They're not going to be able to continue their programs and keep their elites happy and keep the military happy. They're going to have to start making choices that they haven't had to choose before.
When we visited North Korea this spring, we saw Kim Jong-un unveil a massive new neighborhood of shimmering high-rises, his way of showing the world that 8 previous rounds of UN sanctions over more than a decade did not work. But this time, China says it will fully enforce the sanctions, which means cutting off a lot of the trade that happens here in the Chinese border town of Dandong. North Korea's ability to keep funding its weapons program will likely come at the expense of its citizens, many of whom are already forced to work in other countries. They send their pay, worth more than $1 billion, to the regime. The new sanctions won't end that or address the Chinese companies and banks that continue to do business with North Korea.
It's good that we have a resolution, but the next step is making sure that all of these areas, all these loopholes, all the areas that have been called out are fixed one by one.
Another big thing these sanctions do not address is the oil that China exports to North Korea. It's widely believed that if China were to simply cut that off, the North Korean regime would eventually collapse. China has no interest in seeing that happen because they fear a refugee crisis on the roughly 800-mile-long border it shares with North Korea. Margaret?
Ben Tracy in Beijing, thank you.